Hey everybody, today is going to be a drawing tutorial video. In the past, people have asked me how I construct drawings kind of from beginning to end. Now it's a complex process to explain everything like that, but what I can do is show you something I really haven't done before, at least not too many times, that is to show you how I begin a drawing and how I begin to refine, because the way that I work is a little bit different from some of the advice that I've been given over the years, and I thought I might share that with you. So what I'm going to do here is begin a drawing of the dream girl from Dreamside, and I just want to show you how I begin. And you might be surprised by how I do begin, because it's a very, very fluid, rough process. I don't think too hard about exactly what I want to see at this phase. I just have sort of an idea, just a spark in my mind that is roughly what I want the piece to feel like. So you can see right here, I've got in a sort of, like she's sort of angled. It almost looks like she's flying. Here's her shoulders. Here's one shoulder, here's the other. And then I've got maybe her eye would be about here and another eye there. Nose be about there and mouth be about there. Okay, so you can see it's just a super, super quick sketch, and I'm not worried about the quality of the lines at this point. I'm only concerned about the feeling that it has. And so I'm going to use these really messy, wavy, sketchy lines to get that feeling conveyed. Okay? I'm not gonna get hung up on details. And that's something that I think really holds a lot of us back, especially when we're getting started, is dealing with getting caught up in details, and then you realize later on that, oops, the piece doesn't really work, it doesn't convey the feeling that I want, the character doesn't look right, whatever, and suddenly you have to scrap a lot of work that you spent all this time on. So it's much, much better if you can just work all that stuff out here in this very rough sketch phase. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taking advantage of 3 digital tools. The first is I got this pencil, right, that's it's got kind of a bit of a texture to it. It doesn't apply very intensely on the canvas, so it allows me to kind of apply these light lines as I'm working out the shapes. All right. The second I'm doing is I'm using this flip feature, the horizontal flip of the canvas, and that helps me see the piece begin to develop as almost like a 3D figure. Because as I flip it back and forth, I can begin to really see the problems with the piece. I can see where maybe one of the eyes is particularly lopsided or something, and I don't really notice that if I just stare at the piece, because any drawing like this is a conversion of a 3D concept into a 2D illustration, right? I'm flattening something which in the real world would be 3-dimensional. And in the process of doing that, it's very easy to lose yourself in the graphic flatness of the 2D image and forget that you're drawing a 3-dimensional, a representation of a 3-dimensional object. Okay, and the final tool that I use at this phase is the spring-loaded eraser. And what I'm doing is I'm holding. I've got the eraser programmed into one of the hotkeys on my drawing tablet. And the spring-loaded function means that if I hold it, when I press it like this, it'll switch to the eraser. And then when I'm done erasing and I let go, it'll pop back to the pencil. And this is really, really helpful, because I'm not going back and selecting the eraser here and kind of breaking my workflow like that. I'm sort of just losing myself in the drawing, and I'm not thinking about the tools. Okay? Just like if I was using a pencil on paper, I wouldn't be thinking about oh, I've got to switch to this other pencil, or use a different tool. I would just sketch with a pencil. All right. And so I'm taking advantage of these digital tools, because when you draw with a pencil on paper and you have this many sort of rough lines in there, it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to erase them all as you refine the drawing. So you usually will have to draw in a very light fashion. It's very possible to do. Of course, we can sketch with a pencil. But what I love about this digitally is that I can completely eliminate those rough lines as I refine the drawing as I move along, okay? And so I can get my final line art without having to make a new layer. The reason that I like to do that not use a new layer is because, years ago I remember talking with an animator friend of mine. He was a Disney animator, and I showed him some sketches of a character that I had done. And what I did was I took the character and I kind of refined it. This is on paper, mind you. And I did kind of a finished line art over the sketch by putting another piece of paper over it. And I showed him the finished drawing, and I was all proud of it, and I thought he was going to react really well to it, and he said, and he thought it was okay. But then he noticed that I had the sketch on the previous piece of paper. This was in a book. And so he looked at the sketch and he said, okay, this is so much better. And I said, well, why? It's because it has all this life that you sort of lost in the finished drawing. Okay, and when you sketch really freely like this, you're not, like I said, you're not hung up on details, so you can sort of figure things out in a very rapid fashion. And you're making these energetic lines that have a lot of feeling and expression to them. And you're not nervous about it. You ever notice when you go to do a drawing from scratch, sometimes you look at that blank piece of paper and it's really scary? Because there's nothing on there yet, and you're worried about messing it up, particularly if it's in one of those really expensive sketchbooks that's hardbound and you can't really rip the paper out. And it's very difficult sometimes to just get started. Well, this sketching process alleviates a lot of that, because I can just get in there. I'm not worried because no line is sacred at this point. There's nothing that is untouchable. I can erase or and redraw anything that's on here. And you can see there is a lot of erasing and redrawing that I'm doing here. I'm totally redefining the proportions of things as I go, because I'm not liking how they were formed before. I'm not liking the shapes, so they have to be reworked. And this is how I draw everything that goes into Dreamside. So you can see there's an awful lot of thought that goes into each pose. And this is because I'm drawing in sort of a reactive fashion. At least I call it reactive sketching. Because in my mind, I don't have the ability really to visualize exactly what I want a piece to look like. I might know what I want it to feel like, and that's usually the case. I know what I want to feel when I look at the piece. But I don't know exactly what I want to draw. I don't know what pose I should put the character in, or what expression I should give her face. And the only way for me to really figure that out is to sketch it out and then react to what I've put down and see what I want to change. And that's really the only way that I know how to do it. And I don't know if that means, I don't have an awful lot of talent. Maybe I don't have that vision that a lot of artists have. And I'm more of a guy who was never really designed to draw, who just decided that he was going to do it. Or if I do have talent, and this is just my way of doing it, but you can see that sort of thing says a lot about that whole talent versus skill debate. That for me is kind of a pointless one. I think that if you really want to do this, you'll figure it out. I mean, look at me. I've been working on Dreamside for years at this point. I'm saying, well, if I had a lot of talent, and this was just easy for people with talent to do, then it wouldn't have taken me 5 years to get my first book going. I probably would have finished it much faster. And if I'm very happy with the results that I've gotten with the images. So if I don't have a lot of talent, because it took me 5 years, right? Then I guess you can do this even if you don't have talent. So I wouldn't even worry about that. If you want to draw, then draw. If you want to make something, make it. I've done a few videos in the past where I talk about how wonderful it is that we at least, hopefully most people listening, live in a part of the world in which you're free to make whatever you want. You're not limited by some of the things that have limited us in the past, and in certain parts of the world are still unable to get past. But living in Western New York in the United States, I have the freedom to make any story that I want to make. I just have to convince other people that it's worth their time to read, I guess. That's how I'm going to sell books, right? And hopefully that will happen when I finally have one for sale. So hopefully this is showing you a bit about how you can start things in a very rough fashion and evolve it as you go. I always tend to start my drawings in a rough manner like this because I was educated as an animator. And that's something that you really need to do with animation, is you've got to rough out your poses. Think about the positions of things. Of course, I'm talking about traditional animation there. It's still important to work out your poses in 3D, but I'm talking more about the problems that can arise if you spend all that time cleaning up production drawings that really don't work very well. It's better that you had worked it out. See, I'm still using that spring-loaded eraser, still finding the right shapes for the character. The Dream Girl is Sarah's mysterious friend from Dreamside, if you've been following the story, and it's not really clear just who or what she is. But at least in terms of what she looks like, she looks to be a girl around Sarah's age, which is not really specified in the book, but she's a relatively young girl. And so I want to make sure that as I'm drawing her, I'm careful to not age her too much. So right now I'm refining the jaw a little bit here and making sure that it looks a bit more delicate. But you can see that in the process of doing that, whoops, it doesn't connect with the ear anymore. So this is when I will take advantage of the marquee selection tool, and I'm actually going to probably cut back the entire backside of her head here as I attempt to get that ear into a better position. I'll do that, and then I'll make a selection of the ear itself and some of the hair. And you can see I'm being rough about this too. I'm not thinking too hard about messing up those lines. I just want to get everything in the right place, because it's relatively easy for me to go in and erase a lot of this, as I've been doing, and get things to be closer to where they actually need to be. And I can worry about refining later. I'm not happy with the hairline up here. I want to rethink this. I've drawn this character's hair so many times, and it's so complex. It's made up of all these different shapes that sort of weave in and out of each other. That's complex, and it takes a lot of time to draw. But it's an important part of the character's design that she sort of has this kind of fairy-like the lines are very curvy, you know. She flows in a sort of a whimsical fashion. And that's an important part of the character's design. It's not as much the case with Sarah. She's a bit more rigid in her poses. Need to knock the jaw back a little bit here. You can see how flipping it really helps me see what's wrong. Just working and reworking over and over again. And I'm just spending a little bit of time here, refining, reshaping, reforming. It's easy when you're doing this to get stressed out and start to feel like you're losing command over the piece. And it's really, really important that you don't lose heart when you hit these points. You've got to push through them, and this is where the real work comes in with drawing. Is you've got to have the resolve to push through these challenging moments. Like right now, I'm really, really trying to break myself out of something that I think I'm not real thrilled about it. But I know that if I just keep thinking about what I don't like, observing the points that are not working, and refining, erasing, and redrawing, I know that I can get this to a point that I'm happy with. And it's already feeling better just from those changes that I made. So you've got to have the willingness to work with this stuff. It's not always going to be easy, and even when you've drawn a character as many times as I've drawn this one, as you can see, there are times when you'll struggle with the character that you know so well. It's just the way it goes. This is a rather subjective process. And it can be very hard to sit down and say, I know within the next 6 hours or whatever, I'm going to draw this many pieces and I'm going to be happy with them and all of that, because you may sit down for the full 6 hours and not get one good drawing. It's one of the reasons that scheduling with this kind of stuff is so difficult, and why so many artists say that you just have to call it quits at a certain point. Now, fortunately for Dreamside, because it's a personal project, I'm not really stuck with a very specific, rigid schedule for a company that knows that we need to ship at a certain point or something like that. I can just kind of take my time. And of course, I want to make sure that I'm not taking too long on it. I want to make sure that you guys are able to buy a copy of the book at some point in the near future. But it's very, very important to me that it's done just right. I don't want to print a book that is less than my absolute best and is less than just truly excellent work. And that's why I spend so much time doing this. It's funny, sometimes it's almost embarrassing how long it takes. If every Friday I do a video like this, it's very possible that I haven't even progressed past, one new illustration since the previous Friday. And that's because of situations like this where, maybe, and Mary, this is a very simple drawing. It's just her. I don't have an environment here. But if it's a complex shot that includes environment details, I might really be working something out for a long time. but that's okay. Because if you really love doing this, if you love the satisfaction of seeing the finished piece sort of come alive, and you can take a lot of pleasure in that, it helps you deal with the less pleasant, challenging moments. Okay, I feel like I'm finally starting to feel good about the proportions here and where everything is. So the next process is really just to refine it and start to erase out a lot of these very messy lines and just get it to the point where it's basically got one consistent line that goes throughout with varying levels of thickness, but I don't want to I don't want all these sketchy lines to remain in here in the finished piece. So I'll erase them out rather than doing another layer, because I still want to retain that energy that was in the sketch. I'm just working it over and over again, erasing lines that didn't work, adding in new lines. The eyes are really, really important. You'll hear that a lot, and it's really true. And the reason for that is they're really what we look at first when we see a drawing or a photo of a person. Pretty much no matter what else is in the piece. You can try to get the attention to go somewhere else, but when somebody is reading a comic and they open up, they go to a new page, right, and it's got a person, their eyes will 9 times out of 10 snap directly to the eyes of the character that's drawn. I think that's because when we talk to each other, we tend to look at each other's eyes. That whole window to the soul thing that I'm sure you've heard before. Yeah, it's true. And I think that there's a lot of ways of adding character beyond the eyes. I've always said that the hands are very important because they sort of reveal some of the more subconscious thoughts that the character has, because we don't really always think about what we're doing with our hands while we're talking. If you've ever been nervous talking to somebody before and you catch yourself holding your hand at some weird position, it's just a funny little thing that we do. I guess it's kind of like biting nails. But it's good to be able to work that in. But the eyes are really where our attention tends to snap first. I'm going to move this eye up a little bit. This is, of course, one of the major advantages of working digitally. It's the ability to use like the marquee selection and just move things around. Of course, I couldn't do that on paper. I have to erase and redraw. And it's not that it's not laziness, I guess, that I think most digital artists are motivated by, not wanting to go through all that redrawing and everything, because obviously you can see I'm still doing a lot of that here. I think it's more that it just comes down to productivity. If I have to redraw the whole drawing because I drew the eye at the wrong position, that's gonna waste a lot of time. And as much time as this is taking, if I had to go through numerous sketches to get here working on paper, I think that would take longer in the end. Or what's much more likely is that I wouldn't redraw it that many times and I would just let it be at a certain point, and that wouldn't get me the kind of result that I really, really want. Okay? So anyway, I don't want to take up too much time here refining this drawing, but I wanted to show you how I tend to think when I'm constructing a drawing from scratch. And you can understand, hopefully, why I don't always talk about this process, because it is very time consuming and it's difficult to explain exactly what I'm doing. But there you go. There is the start of a Dream Girl illustration. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Leave your comments below. And visit my website, which is www.dmcumba.com, and I've got a contact form on there. I've got a subscription link, so please do subscribe to both my website and my YouTube channel, and I promise to keep the interesting content flowing as well as I can. So thanks for spending some time with me today, and we'll see you next time.